Welcome back to Crux Stationalis, where we continue our Lenten pilgrimage through Rome's station churches. I'm your host, Jacob Stein, and today, on the Thursday of the second week of Lent, we step into the heart of Trastevere, into one of Rome's most ancient and beloved churches, Santa Maria in Trastevere. Beneath its golden mosaics and sacred art lies the tomb of a pope who gave his life for the faith, Pope St. Callistus I. And as a special treat in this podcast, you're going to hear a typical Jacob Stein story of going to explore the church for the very first time. And when you're done listening to this typical story of Jacob Stein, you're going to be able to click into the podcast description and watch the video tour of this beautiful basilica, recently restored in the last couple of years. The facade, it's stunning to step into, so don't miss out on that either. Let's continue. Callistus was a pope during the turbulent 3rd century, a time of fierce persecution under Emperor Alexander Severus. Before his election, Callistus had endured great hardship, falsely accused, sentenced to hard labor in the mines of Sardinia, and later freed through the intervention of the Church. Despite this suffering, he rose to become the Bishop of Rome, leading the Christian community with wisdom and mercy. Tradition tells us that Callistus met a martyr's death here in Trastevere, thrown into a well by a mob stirred up against him. His body was retrieved and laid to rest in a humble tomb near the site of his martyrdom. Later, his relics were transferred into the basilica, where they now rest beneath the high altar. Santa Maria in Trastevere, one of the oldest churches dedicated to the Virgin Mary, stands as a fitting home for this martyr pope. Its shimmering apse mosaics by Pietro Cavallini depict the Madonna enthroned, a vision of heavenly glory that frames the resting place of Callistus. The cosmotesque floors, flickering candlelight, and solemn hush of pilgrims remind us that this church is a witness to faith enduring through the ages. So today, when we go visit his tomb, we remember Pope St. Callistus, a shepherd who suffered for his flock, and we pray for the courage to remain steadfast in our own faith. As we know, the Roman Station Church pilgrimage takes us from tomb to tomb of a martyr. And so today, as I just told you, we go to San Callisto, St. Callistus. And I was studying abroad in Rome in 2011. So it was my second time in Rome. I was there for a couple months, and 2 weeks after being there, I had a free Friday. On Fridays, we could, I didn't have classes, that we could travel, or we could explore the city. And I wanted to go visit Trinità dei Pellegrini. And at that time, this is 2011, so 14 years ago, the websites weren't the same things. You never knew if you were getting the right information. You still don't know if you're getting the right information from websites. For example, last night, to celebrate the feast of Saint Joseph in my town that I live in, he's the patron. Fireworks were supposed to start at 9 p.m. They started at 9:40 p.m. So you kind of were shooting in the dark whenever you wanted to go visit a place you had never been to, or you didn't know for sure if the website was correct. So I was hoping to go to Mass at 7:30 in the morning at Trinità dei Pellegrini. So I get there 7:25, like a good seminarian, 5 minutes before, not right on time, but a little bit before in anticipation. And as I walked in the door, there was already Holy Communion being distributed. And so I said, what? I said, how does this happen? I was like, I checked multiple times that it was 7:30. Anyways, for some reason, there was a discrepancy with online. And so this was one of my first experiences in that regard. So I said, okay, it's October 14th. It's the feast of San Callisto. I know he's in Santa Maria in Trastevere, so I'll go. I was a bit frustrated because I was like maybe a 40-minute walk to get to Trinità, and from where I was living. And so I went. I said, okay, I'm just a few minutes away from Trastevere. I'll go there and visit San Callisto on his feast day, which I think I probably had the plan to do that anyways. And so I go back, or I go to San Callisto, and I'm in a cassock, mind you. So if I'm in a church and it's the feast day of the saint, you think there'd be context clues to this sort of situation. But I go into the church and I didn't know where San Callisto was. I didn't, like I grew up in America. I never thought, okay, well, there's the main altar. There's a bathtub basin, Roman bathtub basin in the altar. Maybe that's the tomb of San Callisto. I didn't know. So, and I just didn't even know how to even think to know where he was. So I saw someone in clerics. I assumed it was a priest, and in my bad Italian, I said, "Dove il corpo di San Callisto?" And maybe my pronunciation was even worse than it is now. But he looked at me. He said, "Huh?" He said, "Il bar di San Callisto è fuori." And I said, "No." I was like, "No." I was like, how do I say this again in a way that makes sense? Where is the body of San Callisto? But I didn't know. Right outside the basilica, there is quite a famous bar called Bar San Callisto. It's always sort of thriving. In the mornings, you have old men there playing cards. In the evenings, you have the ragazzi, hanging out with their friends. It's right in the heart of Trastevere, which is quite a popular hangout place, anyways, for the youth, and it's just sort of a bustling neighborhood. So I was like, what? How did he not understand my question? So I said, whatever. I'm not going to the Bar San Callisto. And I didn't, for an American to hear Bar San Callisto at 8:15 in the morning, you're like, why is he trying to send me to a bar? You didn't realize that was the same name they used for the cafe. So, anyways, I knelt down. I prayed to San Callisto. I was like, I know you're here. I don't know where you are. Rome was quite new to me. I had been on pilgrimage for, 5 days once before in Rome, which was actually during this week of Lent that I was in Rome, because my first ever mass I went to in Rome was actually the station liturgy at San Clemente on the Monday. And then we were leaving on Thursday, and so I remember we didn't actually visit inside Santa Maria in Trastevere, but before we had to get to the airport that day, we ran off to Santa Maria in Trastevere in the morning, but the doors were closed, and so we just stayed outside and admired it from the outside. So I had no context clues for being ever in the basilica. I had no memory of it. So I come back, I'm studying abroad, and I have this situation. So I kneel down, I pray to San Callisto. I'm like, it's your feast day. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and check. I didn't check. Maybe there's different times on the bulletin at Trinità. So I said, I'm going to go back because I know there's a 6:30 Mass that's supposed to be scheduled in the evening. So I went back and I didn't see any times. So I go into the sacristy and I'm in a cassock, so that kind of gives you a bit of welcome from people. And sitting there on the bench was a man who would become a good friend of mine. I didn't understand that he wasn't Italian, so I just tried to speak Italian to him with asking if there was a mass in the evening. He said, you can speak to me. He's like, I'm Canadian. You can speak to me in English. So I said, I came here this morning, and then I went to San Callisto, and then I come back, and I'm giving him too much information for my story. And I just said, I just want to check, is there Mass at 6:30 tonight? And he said, oh, well, you can just serve the Mass now of this priest who's going to celebrate Mass. So I did, which was very nice. I served Mass at the altar of St. Gregory there at Trinità. And then afterwards, I had a coffee and a ciambella, a donut. If you've ever been to Italy and you know they do these donuts that sort of like have powdered big granular sugar on them. So we had that. This cafe doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. It was a great place right in front of the Trinità for a coffee. Now it's a sandwich shop. But here I am giving you too much information. But it's just funny because this was my first day ever at Trinità. And so I formed a friendship from just this encounter, this sort of like fortuitous dilemma of not being able to go to the early morning mass and then couldn't find the body of San Callisto. So I'm telling you all of this because this is a very special church in my life, Santa Maria in Trastevere, just because of these memories and the friendships that came out of this moment. And this friend that I met was actually the sacristan at the time of Trinità. And when I would come back and I moved to Rome and then I was the sacristan, I got to know him even more. And I've learned a lot from him, and he formed me, trained me in a lot of ways with his own faith, with his own spirituality when it came to the Holy Mass. And so, and this, he became a confrere of mine, or I became a confrere of his, in the Venerable Archconfraternity of the Most Holy Trinity. And this is our confrere who unfortunately passed away in September of last year. And so if we can pray for his peaceful repose. Giancarlo is his name. But it's interesting that I know it wasn't on the station day, but nonetheless, there was this desire on the feast of San Callisto to go visit his tomb. And so we too, in these days of Lent, have been going to the tombs of these martyrs because we need the sustenance, we need the example. We need to understand that this life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not, I mean, sometimes you're going to have to speed up. Sometimes you're going to have to slow down. But it's going the whole course throughout life. And these martyrs are the ones who, as we said, he suffered, and then he was the Pope, and then he was martyred. Let that be an example for you today. Thank you for joining us today at Crux Stationalis, and tomorrow we go to San Vitale. As always, don't forget to share this with your family and friends. I know this one's a bit more of a personal anecdote of a story, but go and click down in the description of the podcast, and you'll be able to watch the video tour of Santa Maria in Trastevere, which has some special treats there. So have a good day, and God bless you.